Cool. So just to get a gauge on everyone's kind of level here, who here is already just starting with growth-driven design? Just heard about it, curious about it, just show of hands. Okay, awesome. Who here is actively trying to sell growth-driven design but has not sold a retainer? Awesome. And who here has sold at least one retainer? Okay, awesome. So we have a pretty much all, like, I lost my voice, by the way, so I'm going to sound like a 13-year-old schoolboy. So we have a very good mix of people, and I think that's awesome because we're going to have a good mix of different questions. And as part of that is if you ask a question, you'll get a free t-shirt as well. So that's a little extra incentive. When you ask a question at the very end after the talk, come and find me, I'll get you a t-shirt. So growth-driven design. What is growth-driven design? Just to recap everyone in, I'll give you the quick spiel. So previous to HubSpot, I worked at a partner agency for 5 years, and we were primarily a web shop. 75% of our revenue is web design, and what we found was that when we actually looked at this time that we were spending on building sites, they were not profitable. We walked away with very little profit margin, sometimes none, and we lost, right? How many people, maybe that's happened to them before? You look back, you're like, shit, I just worked for 6 months for nothing. And so I figured out there's got to be a better way. And so we started thinking of this idea of continuous web improvement. Wasn't quite as sexy as growth-driven design back then, and we started implementing it a little bit. But it really was an industry-wide problem. As all of you who are here know, it's something that we all struggle with. And so when I jumped to my next adventure at HubSpot, I had the opportunity to continue this moving. So growth-driven design is really looking at the problems with traditional design from your prospect's perspective. It's the amount of time it takes to build a site. Right? So the 3 to 6 months of time, of energy, all that goes into that, it's a long time to value. Right? So it's not only bad for your client who's paying money and not seeing anything, it looks bad for the agency in terms of driving results for them. It's the amount of time and resources that's put in. It's the fact that it always goes over budget, always gets delivered late. And then once we've actually launched the thing, we're so happy it's out the door that we rarely touch it for 1.5 to 2 years until we have to. And so, of course, that's not optimal for results. The other challenge, as many of you probably know from the agency side, is that I've talked to many agencies and they basically lose money on the website in order to get them into an inbound retainer. Does that sound familiar to some of you? Okay, and that really shouldn't be, one, that's not smart as a business when there's ways for us to drive not only additional value with the website, but also additional revenue. So that's where the growth-driven design methodology is put together. I'm not going to ramble too much more on it because you probably already are familiar. So I want to try and transition it over and talk a little bit about some of the learning lessons from Media Junction. When I first started it, I picked 20 agencies to get involved, just a minimum viable test, see was this a good idea or should I focus my time elsewhere? And they were one of them, and right away jumped in head first. And so let's give them a round of applause for just being like, you know, it's as many of you know, when it's something new, it's risky. You know, you got to figure it out. But they were up for the challenge and they stepped up. And in their first 8 months, they sold about $550,000 of retainer work with growth-driven design only, not including inbound. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But since then, they've sold more, and the way that they've been selling, the way they've been servicing is very, very different than what it was 1.5 years ago. And that's what the story is going to be today. So we'll transition it over, and you can kind of walk us through some of that story.
Awesome. All right, well, we'll first just start with a quick round of introductions, just so you guys can put a face to a name. My name is Nora Vani. I'm a project coordinator and junior strategist at Media Junction. We'll just go down the line here. Ryan, you want to go next?
I'm Ryan Von Bergen. I'm the creative director at Media Junction.
My name is Tyler Pouch, and I am the business development manager.
My name is Kim Wilcox. I'm the vice president and a strategist at Media Junction.
I'm Trish Lessard, and I'm the CEO.
So you got a good mix of every different department. So no matter which department you sit in, one of these people can help you, okay?
Yeah, so sort of you know who to direct your sort of questions to when we get to that segment of the session. So today we're going to talk, as Luke mentioned, about our experience with growth-driven design, explore a few case studies and how this process unfolded with actual clients, and then go into some lessons that we've taken away from the project process and also the sales process as you are trying to position and sell a growth-driven design retainer in your agency. And then, of course, second half of the session, all Q&A. Start thinking about what you're curious about. So some of you, if not many of you, have seen this slide.
Who's seen this slide?
Who's seen this? Yeah, so this is in the trainings on growthdrivendesign.com, the HubSpot Growth Driven Design training. And this is just an example of a comparison between the traditional website design projects that we would have pitched clients, but instead the actual growth-driven design contracts that we ended up signing with these 4 clients, and the projected revenue increase that we expected to see from these projects. So this was created back in June of 2015, which is already like a year and a half ago now, which is hard to believe. But today we're going to take a closer look at these 4 contracts specifically and give you a little more context to understand what went well and what didn't. So the first case was a corporate merger. These 2 brands were coming together under a new brand and looking to explore a website project. They ended up being a very good fit for growth-driven design, despite being a very large organization, because their marketing team was really engaged in the process and really on board with the idea of the minimum viable product and getting that the iterations out the door after we launched the Launchpad. Additionally, we had a good planning process with them. They had very well set expectations for the project process. And they actually ended up signing on for another 6-month retainer after we actually are concluding our 12-month retainer with them at the end of this upcoming month. So very successful project. If we take a look at the revenue, we had projected a 55% increase over a normal website project. It actually ended up being 73% because of that extended retainer agreement. So this was a successful project, a retainer. The second case is a small local business. We're based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and this was a local client who came to us, was very excited about the prospect of growth-driven design, mainly because he knew that if he went with the traditional project, he wouldn't be touching that website for a year and a half, like Luke said, and he wanted to keep those iterations going and keep improving his site. So he was very engaged throughout the process, had a very clear sense of what his goals were and what he wanted to see out of the marketing, the growth-driven design process. And again, re-upped. We extended this retainer agreement with him for another year. And as a result, projected revenue was way lower than it actually was because we had another 12-month agreement out of this client engagement. So very successful example of growth-driven design. The third case is not so successful. So here's where we get to the negative case. This client was a startup app developer just creating a new app for mobile devices. And they were not a great fit, for one reason, because their internal stakeholders were not aligned. They were not clear on both the product messaging and positioning and also just communication around the project. We were constantly getting conflicting signals from their team. So it was very challenging to align and move quickly through these changes. Additionally, the app launch was delayed multiple times, which made it really hard to drive value for our clients because they weren't seeing that return on investment because they didn't have their product out. So as a result, we ended up actually mutually ending the contract. No termination fee. We both agreed that it was time to conclude the process 5 months early. And as a result, that actual revenue was a little bit lower than we had expected. But still, I mean, compared to the traditional website, still 237% above where we would be with a traditional website project with this client. So still, even being a failure, a modest success. So just wasn't a great fit. Fourth case on that slide is a software as a service company. This Launchpad was up in 28 days.
Let's give them a round of applause.
Which was very fast. And they were really excited about the growth-driven design Launchpad process and were on board with getting a streamlined version of their website up very quickly and starting those improvements. They were very engaged throughout the process, which created a successful result. After the initial 12-month retainer, or 6-month retainer, I should say, we've re-upped twice with another 6-month and another 6-month SLA, service level agreement, with this client, since they were looking for more sort of support for their own marketing activities rather than continuing that iterative testing and improvement process through growth-driven design. But again, really successful project, looking at 250% of the revenue we would gain from a traditional website project for this client. So they were a great fit as well. So those were the 4 cases from the slide in June 2015. And what have we learned in those 18 months since we started GDD? When really what it comes down to is we underestimated the impact of GDD on our business. It really changes the way that we work with clients and the way that we set expectations and continue to improve these websites. So 4 key lessons that I'll leave you with today, or will leave you with today. Lesson 1, not everyone is a fit for GDD. Internally or externally. It can be the client that's not a fit, or it can even be members of our own team that weren't a fit. So we had to kind of think through how we were structuring these growth-driven design teams, and also just seeing if the client was really a good fit for this project type. As you saw, we had a case where it didn't really work out with the client. So some clients, whether it's because they want to finish that project and move on, they don't want really that ongoing engagement, they don't want to continue that strategic process, or they just can't accept the faster pace of a GDD build. Some clients are not a fit. Lesson 2 is don't lead with speed. So in the sales process, something that we really took away from this is that selling people on the idea that they'll have a website in 45 or 60 days creates a toxic perception around this idea that they'll have that perfect gem of a website that they would have at the end of a 3-month, 6-month website build in 45 days. That's just never going to happen, right? What we're doing is we're creating a fully formed MVP and adding to it, right? Looking at that 80% of the wish list after we launch. So leading with that speed created a misalignment of perception because GDD ultimately requires more time of the client. So we want to make sure that that expectation is set up front. Lesson 3 is that we are always planning, which is something that with traditional website projects, you sort of get in the rhythm in your bones, right? You don't really have to think about what are we doing this week, what are we doing this month to achieve the key metrics we've set out for this month of the retainer. And so you really have to solidify that wish list and organize the incentives, the initiatives that you have internally in sprints and plan for the unexpected because working with traditional website projects and GDD projects, it's a lot to sort of balance those 2 different workflows, waterfall versus agile, as it were. So we were trying to just think ahead, always be planning, try to reduce that launchpad scope creep at the beginning and continue to iterate once we launch. One reason that I am speaking right now is that I am the project coordinator on a lot of these projects, and my background is from a software company. So I worked as part of an agile team using Scrum and was a good fit. My skill set was a good fit for this process coming in from the outside of the team. So something to consider there. And lesson 4, assign a key stakeholder, and this is on the client side. Something that can be a major roadblock is in these projects if you have design by committee or 8 executive stakeholders who all, they want to see this or that in the launchpad. That launchpad is going to get bogged down. It will completely derail the launchpad site. So keep one key member as the final decision maker and key communicator throughout this process. And also just be sure, this may go without saying, but to keep a thorough documentation of this process just to make sure that everything is on the books. We use Basecamp for our website projects. But yeah, having that one point person makes things move much quicker. And how has GDD changed our sales process? As you guys are positioning growth-driven design in your own businesses, we have a couple lessons we'd like you to take away on selling this to your prospects and your clients. So one is that GDD lengthened our sales cycle. And what we mean by that is we take more time with these prospects who may be a good fit for GDD to explain this process and dig into the materials, for instance, that are prepared by HubSpot, by Luke, to get them to really understand what we're working with here, right? Because some people, there's the misconception that it's not really even a full website, I don't want half a website. No, it's not us. We take the time to educate them, right? And we have to set those expectations up front. Secondly, we want to identify prospects who are the right fit. This may go without saying, but we have to listen for cues, red flags, that may indicate that they're not a good fit for this project. And this has been a major learning experience, as we say. We've had a few clients that really weren't a fit for GDD, and these projects sort of morphed into a real big website build and then a retainer. So we're trying to keep that in mind as we move forward and really sign on for these projects with clients who are a great fit for this process. We also take a more consultative approach in our sales process. Rather than presenting all of the options and saying, pick and choose, We listen to where they're coming from, their business, their goals, their sort of approach to marketing, right? They have to have this agile mindset and want to keep, just be flexible and iterative in this process. So we want to keep away from sending multiple proposals at once, right? We're listening to what the client needs, and we may recommend a traditional website design or a GDD website design, depending on what we think is the best fit for their business. Next, we're offering different packages. So rather than offering the Launchpad and a 12-month retainer, which is all we did when we first started out with GDD, we're offering more flexible engagements. So we offer 3-month, 6-month retainer agreements after the Launchpad launches, instead of just these large, long-term agreements. It has to do with how the size of the client's business and also the type of goals that they're really trying to meet. If it's exponentially larger, you have your small local business, they might not have the same goals that a major enterprise client has. So we can be flexible with our retainer agreements to meet those goals. And finally, this is sort of a process thing, but it does have to do with sales. Sales is involved in these project retrospectives after each of these iterations, just to make sure that as we're learning throughout this growth-driven design process, we are iterating on the sales process as well, not just the website, because we want to refine this approach and continue to iterate on the language to better support the team and the client throughout this process. So here's a new version of that slide for you guys. Luke, we'll give this to you after this so you can update.
Please.
No. So here's another 4 examples of contracts that we have with our growth-driven design clients. And here you can see reflected that flexibility in the retainer agreements. We have 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month retainers. The scope of those launch pads, again, has to do with the size of the business. That launch pad may, if you have a client, it's an enterprise client, they have a 600-page website, that Launchpad website's going to be a little bigger than the client who has a 60-page website, right? So we quote that accordingly. And then moving into the retainer, we're creating that value based on their goals, based on their needs.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
So
go.
does the first price also include strategy as well?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah,
you
so
wrap
that's
that
the
together.
strategy and Launchpad. And then once we've created that wish list, created that foundation, then we're executing upon that in the retainer process. So and finally, the 4th contract there, the $10,000 a month retainer, something to note there is that is a full inbound marketing, sales enablement, and GDD retainer. So that value is really much larger, and hence the larger price tag. So that's a little context for our discussion today, and without further ado, let's answer some questions.
Thank you.
All right, so there's a microphone right here. Let's try and use the microphone. I don't know, just so everyone in the crowd can hear it. So you get free T-shirts if you ask questions. So I know there's some questions, and if you ask a question, come up after the session. I'll get you your T-shirt. Yes.
Hi.
Hey.
Thank you all for sharing this with us. My question is, what are those cues that, what are the 3 biggest cues that tell you good fit, not a good
Red
fit?
flags, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, red flags, exactly.
Well, a few examples of red flags. We can talk about green flags. Is green flag? Checkered flag for the race. Red flags, for sure, especially in large organizations, are complaints. I didn't mention this, but complaints about upper management. If they feel like their boss is constantly meddling and they can't get approvals, that's definitely one. And just about general organizational blockers. If they feel like they're not getting the resources they need, that can be a big red flag, for sure.
So is there a question that you ask that intentionally to kind of see if that gets flushed out?
Yeah,
Yeah, obviously as I evaluate some of these needs with the clients that we're working with, learning a lot about that organizational structure. So if they're saying yes, they're a marketing person within the organization, there are many people above that person, and even going to a board of directors that are going to be very involved on the process. If you can vet out some of that and learn what the dynamics of those relationships are, it really helps to alleviate some of those ups and downs of that. And even to continue on with the red flag pieces, as Nora touched on it, the speed is one piece of it, and that's a mistake that I made even originally, saying, hey, we've got a method to build you a website and we can do it super fast. And without having all of that ironed out, I would say, hey team, I sold a website and it needs to be done in 30 days.
And we'd be like,
and don't go
Tyler.
crazy on it, but just do what you're doing, but do it in double the speed.
Yeah, do
double
that
time.
twice as
I
fast.
think we've all had that kind of dynamic with the sales team. We've all been in that situation before, right, a little bit.
Yeah, and then with that even is sometimes we're running into budget restrictions and not leading with saying, hey, this product is cheaper, it devalues what it is you're going to create and sell, but it is a factor to say it provides a new option for people. It's not just, oh, well, I only have $10,000 to kick this thing off. It's more of, okay, I've got $10,000, let's talk about what we can do, and then solidify a relationship that's going to go out into the future where we're going to be providing value that they will be gaining ROI on.
Yeah, and in terms of the go signs that this is a good fit, a few examples that we've had is small local business, because they do want to invest and they see their website as that amazing salesperson they want to drive to their business. Also software, potentially, because if they have that agile approach, I think there's something about that mindset that they may be more open to this kind of iterative approach because it is best practice in their industry. Yeah, that's my take.
I'll maybe just throw like one or two. When I first saw this deck, I think there's two really good nuggets that I pulled out of it. One is the involving sales in the retrospectives. I think is really, really huge, so that they don't just sell the thing and they're like, all right, see you later, and then it goes into a black hole and they never hear about it again. So I think that's going to be really key to get that feedback loop between the two for improvements and flush out some of those red flags.
Which has been super beneficial for me, obviously, in evaluating a lot of those elements. It's stuff that I thought was just part of a methodology that I knew I could sell, but it turns out there are peaks and valleys to all of that.
Yeah. And I think the second thing that stood out, which is just a side note I want to mention before I forget, is, again, just like software companies can be a really good fit for clients, they're also a really good fit for new hires of employees, right? So if you're looking for team members, like we mentioned, when you're looking for team members, most modern software teams are structured very, very similar. I get a lot of the inspiration at GED from that world, and so that can always be a way to look for new hires, is people with that background.
Great question.
Good morning, and thank you for your time.
What's your name?
My name's Randall.
Randall, nice to meet you.
With the Iron Paper team, I want to thank you. We've
nice.
fully embraced GDD, and we've sold a lot of our clients with it.
Nice.
And I think we think it makes sense on a million levels. How can you make good decisions without good data? So, the question is, it's a pretty straightforward one. It's scope creep, and in reality, between when you're speccing and those 28 to 35 to 45 days of launch, as we know in the real world, lots of people start to think and have ideas, and both on the client side and even on the team side. Wouldn't it be cool if it spun? Everyone never said that before? So my question is, and while I know there's no universal answer, do you have any tips, techniques, strategies around keeping a client and even a team in focus, knowing that all the great ideas can come out in the iterative process? Thank you.
Yeah, awesome.
I think the biggest thing is continual education, continual communication. That's why we added a project coordinator to our GDD team, is just to have somebody as a point person on our side of things that can always be reiterating and iterating and talking to the client, to that key stakeholder over and over and over again. And then from the team, like our team, it's just getting the right people on that team and making sure that they know what the ins and outs of GDD are. And then there's less of the, we try and keep the big idea people on the marketing side.
Yeah, and I think just having a strong position with clients and saying, no, this is 20%, we're driving 20% of these pages at launch, and then we'll continue to iterate, and documenting those ideas and really making it clear that they're going to be prioritized, I think is really important, because otherwise it just sounds like you're saying, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. But we will do it. We'll get to that, and we'll look at, okay, second month of the retainer, we're thinking these could be a good improvement.
Yeah, and if I pull on that a little bit, so think about this. Your client's coming to you wanting you to do more work. Like, that's a good thing. That's how you make money. So like, having ideas like that is great. That's what we want our clients to do. We want the gears turning in their head of all these things. But of course, it's our job they're gonna have good ideas, they're gonna have bad ideas. So we need to go through that process and figure out, where does it get prioritized, right? So what you can do is, this is where having a point-based pricing system can be helpful. You can also do it without, but a point-based, if you have a certain amount of points, that puts an invisible box on the amount of work you're gonna do in a month. So when you have all these ideas, at a certain point, based off of how many points each one of those ideas takes, there's gonna be a hard line of this is what we're doing this month. What that allows you to do is when your client has those ideas, you then say, look, first give them a gut check and say, cool, that's an interesting idea. Now remember, we agreed on focusing on this metric to move. Tell me a little bit more. How does this help this metric increase? And sometimes they'll be like, oh, well, yeah, it really doesn't. Like, okay, cool, we'll put it on the side, we'll look at it later down the road. And maybe they do have a compelling reason how it will help. So you say, okay, cool, so let's take a look. Here are all the other things that we as a strategic partner agree that this is what we should do. Where would you prioritize this in everything else? And then they have to make the decision on where they put it in terms of everything else. And then the third question is, okay, that means something else drops down out of that invisible box, and we're gonna have to work on it next month. What are you willing to move out for this month? And then that way, you're not just, they're understanding what your process is, your brain process is, and you're not necessarily saying no, because again, we want them to build that wish list longer and longer and longer. The wish list will be your #1 friend for increasing retainer size and renewing engagements. So think of it as a good thing, but just be diligent about your team going through those questions to prioritize it properly, and then you don't feel bad about pushing back.
Great.
Yeah.
Hi, Luke Summerfield. It's Angela Arnold with Goldstein Group Communications.
Hey,
It's
how's
nice
it
to meet you in person. So I just wanted to ask you this question. We currently don't have GDD as a core competency yet. We should, and we will someday. But in the interim, is partnership with an agency like yours or a GDD expert a good bridge strategy for us? And if so, does it make sense? If not, why not? Thanks.
What are your thoughts?
That's a great question.
Do you work with other agencies yet?
We used to.
Used to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something?
Well, I'll put it this way. There are a lot of agencies that do work with other agencies, and if I started an agency tomorrow and didn't have that as a core competency, I would find a good partner I can partner with.
Right.
So if you go to growthdrivendesign.com/directory, I've already procured a list of agencies that work with other agencies that are GDD certified, and they have starting ranges of launch pads and then starting ranges for their ongoing retainers. So if you go to growthdrivendesign.com/directory, you'll be able to get a list of the people that do that. Eventually we'll roll that into the partner directory, but I kind of fly in my own bubble right now.
But so that is something that we have done in the past and will potentially continue to keep doing. It's more about if it's a fit for both people involved, if we have full transparency with the clients that you're potentially working with, and what are those core competencies that you're offering to